Um, I have got some more videos to upload, but I just need to sort out some storage issues right now. So recording live is probably going to be the way to go for a while. So welcome. This is the other painting that I've been working on, and I'm working with less layers this time because basically I just kind of want to mix my colors as accurately as I can and then just paint directly onto the canvas, which I'm finding is makes the painting go a little bit faster, but it's harder. I think it's actually quite hard mixing your colors totally accurate, but it's worth it. So I'm working on this guy right now with the bronze helmet. I'm just detailing him in. And bronze materials, like bronze or warm reflective materials, are quite tricky. They're quite tricky to paint because there's just a lot going on, temperature-wise and color-wise. So I'm just kind of taking my time with them. But if I take my time and don't rush it, then I should hopefully come to a good result. I'm just gonna... do that. Painting reflective materials is it was a pretty tough subject for me to learn at first, and it still is, to be honest. It's never really going to be easy, but as long as you can understand the I would say the effect of light and shadow and how reflective materials reflect the environment, as long as you can kind of get the basics down packed, then you don't actually have too much trouble with them. So I'll kind of describe what the logic here is. We'll start with the silver materials, or anything that's a cool reflective material like silver or steel. It's a bit easy to paint because basically all you have to keep in mind, let's say, I'll show you the full painting just very quickly, because we got this blue sky up here with like this big mushroom cloud thing in the background. And then down here, we've got like this sort of deserty rock landscape. Right, so now that you're aware of that, now that you're aware of the environment that the figures are in, you can start painting the colors a little more accurately. And it's really rather simple, because all you think about is, well, the top of the helmet is going to be blue because it's reflecting the sky, right? And I don't know if you've noticed, but like in midday, the sky is like a darker, richer blue towards the top. And then as your eye drops down to the horizon, it becomes this brighter turquoisey color, right? And that's literally what I'm doing in the helmet. There's this dark bluish tone at the top of the helmet. And then the colors actually get brighter as it travels downwards on the helmet, right? So do you understand that? And then, of course, you've got the white spot of highlight, which is obviously the sunlight being reflected from the material. So when you're drawing shiny materials, the easiest way to think about it is you're kind of just doing a very tiny landscape painting on that surface. That's the way I think of it. You're simply projecting whatever colors are in the environment onto that surface. If this plane is facing downwards, then it's going to reflect the ground color. Same here. This side flap of the helmet is being projected downwards, so it catches the warm colors of the earth. It's being projected into the surface. This plane that runs along the side, that's facing up, so that's going to reflect the sky color. It's not an easy thing painting reflective materials, but that's really, I think, the simplest way to think of it. You're really just doing a tiny landscape painting within a very extremely limited space. The problem with warm reflective materials is that now you've got to deal with temperature. Now you've got an extra problem to solve. But the logic for that is, how can I best explain? have a look at his helmet, right? You can see there's some really warm tones in the center. My brush is in the way, sorry. There's some warm tones in the center. Now, the reason that's warmer is because that plane is directly facing us. Okay? And then those temperatures begin to cool down as the form rounds out. So as those planes begin to face the sky, those temperatures stop dropping in warmth, or they start to decrease in warmth. They begin to get cooler. So this warm orangey reddish tone then begins to turn into like a warm green, which typically you see in like a sort of bronze material. And then it becomes a little more of a turquoise color until it gradually kind of gets to this sort of blue sky color along the very edge. And that's how you paint that. So you're doing gradual temperature shifts. So you can see here, this side flap of the helmet is very warm, and it's reflecting the ground textures of the earth are being reflected into this part. So it's extremely warm. But this bit that I'm about to paint, and I'll show you, that's going to be cooler because that plane is not facing towards us anymore. It's actually facing away. So whatever temperatures you decide to paint are actually going to be a cooler variant of this. So let's give that a go. I'll quickly show you my palette. Let's get that on screen. Right, so those are my colors. I mean, these ones here. It's a very dirty palette because I didn't clean it. But you know, I've got my cool shadows, I've got my warm shadows. So I've got this green shadow and I've got a red. So I've got a warm and a cool variant. I've got warmer tones for the earth, and I've got these cooler tones for the sky, which are more green. And you can see how the temperatures are shifting from these shadows. You know, they start shifting towards the blue grays and the turquoises. And on this side, they start getting more orange and warm. So it's just gradual temperature shifts. That's the easiest way I can think of color. And if you think about color in that sense, then I think you'll do a better job at mixing them, at least in my opinion. So I need a cooler variant of whatever this yellow is, right? So let's go for that. Let's go, and I can probably just mix a bit of titanium white, because white is a cool color. So if I use a bit of a yellowish tone with a bit of white mixed in, I should kind of get a cooler variant, which I am getting. Definitely am getting that, but it's still quite on the warm side. So I might have to think about reintroducing some of those greens. So maybe I'll take one of these like the earthy greens that I've mixed, and then I'll mix a bit of white into that. All right. Bit of that yellow. Essentially what I'm doing is I'm just kind of graying the tones down. So I'll just quickly, that might work. Let's have a look at that. Yeah, I think that actually isn't too bad. It's a bit bright, but I think it's not bad. Maybe a bit too bright. You know, it's a tricky one. But the best advice when you're figuring out colors, whatever it is you're painting, just paint thinly. Don't be packing on the paint very thick, because otherwise it becomes very tricky to tweak your colors. You just want to paint thinly. So going back to the logic, right? This is like a warm side of that reflective material. So I'm using a lot of red shadows here. I probably want to go for the green shadow on this side, right? So if I grab that, I'll use a different brush so I'm not mixing my tones too much. But let's grab a little bit of that green tone. And I'll place that up here. There we go. That kind of works. What I can also do is I can grab a little bit of that same tone, but just mix a little bit of titanium white, not too much, because I don't want it to go too milky. I just want to adjust the temperature as well as brighten the value just slightly. That's all I'm doing. And I'll just paint that along the very edge. I don't think the camera is really picking up the subtleties of these tones, but you'll just have to take my word for it. That kind of works. Might grab an even cooler green and an even brighter one. That works better. Okay. So it's all about shifting value and shifting temperature. That's all it is. So on a warm reflective surface, again, it's going to be warmest in the center. It's going to be warmest on the plane that is facing directly towards us. And then as the form rolls away, it gets cooler and it starts picking up more of the colors of the environment. And I don't really like to overblend either. I kind of like to, if I can, just sort of maintain some of the texture of the brushwork there. And that's okay, but I think it's a bit bright. So I'm going to grab like a sort of greenish tone, or just like a sort of earthy greenish tone, and just kind of lay that on top of this. It'll kind of mix in, but that's kind of exactly what I want. Normally you shouldn't mix. You should always mix on your palette and not on the canvas, but you know, I think once you've got a feel for your colors, you can kind of go ahead and take educated guesses. Like I think it's pretty obvious what's going to happen here if I do that. That looks better. That looks a bit more toned down, less extreme. But maybe I want to start re-injecting some warmth into it. So I'll go ahead and pick like a warm value, just sort of close to value in this part. And I'll just paint that on this bit here where the surface is kind of turning towards us again. It's a back and forth. It's a back and forth. And it takes obviously a lot of patience, you know, you got to have patience. But you can do it. Now, when I paint reflective materials, I try not to think too hard about shadows, because the reflections, depending on how shiny the object is, usually overpowers the shadows. So you can see there's a streak of shadow under this guy's visor. It's quite dark. That shadow is quite visible. And then it kind of just drops off and turns into a reflection. So like I said earlier, how the warmest tones on this surface is always warmest when the surface is facing towards us. Well, it's the exact same logic with shadows. The shadows are the most visible when the plane is facing towards us. And then as that form rolls away, the shadows kind of disappear with it, and it gradually turns into a reflection. So I don't know if you're seeing that on the screen. So I'll zoom in a little bit. There we go. But hopefully that effect is quite visible to you. So there's a cast shadow here, just a very thin one. And then it gets wider because obviously it's going to sort of drop down, but then it just turns into reflection. It just kind of it just vanishes because the form is turning away now. And that's typically what happens with reflective material. So I'm going to carry on with my little bronze helmet soldier. Let's grab a different brush. Let's have a look. Yeah, let's grab this one. I'll grab that. I'll grab, I might try and pick out some highlights in the forms. Hands are very shaky right now. Maybe there's one there, and I think there'd be another one there. Trying not to go too hard on the details on that side. Okay. So I just need to do something to finish that helmet off. Let me have a look. I'm gonna grab, which color do I want? Maybe that color. I want like a turquoisey color for this panel. There we go. Let's use that in there. And then on the very edge of the helmet, you can see there's like this, you see that blue halo that lies on the very edge of the helmet there? I'll just try and point that out with my paintbrush. It's very subtle, but you can kind of see that blue glow. It's very bright. That's what's called the Fresnel effect. I learned that concept from Scott Robertson's How to Render. And the Fresnel effect is basically where the surface is the most reflective when it's on the very edge of the surface, or if it's like further away from the viewer. If you think about like a river or a body of water, the reflections are always most visible the furthest away from you. So this helmet, which is very spherical, that reflection will be strongest on the very edge right there, because that's where it's going to be reflecting the sky, right? So, you know, these are pretty tricky concepts, and it takes time to ingrain them into your practice, but you can do it. So what I'll do is I'll grab that sky color. Let's see, which brush do I want? I'll go for this one. So here we go. I'll show you my palette again. My sky color is basically this sort of bluish, grayish, little bit of green in it. And it's green because, again, we're working on a warm reflective surface. So everything's going to have like a warmer tone to it. I'm going to pick up a bit of that. I'm going to place that probably right there where that plane would be reflecting. It would be picking up a bit more of that sky color. Because I've also painted it on the edge of his helmet, but you can't really see it because it blends in with the underpainting. But where this plane sort of begins to flick up, it would be catching just a drop of that sky color. So I might just put that in there. And hopefully that looks good. I don't know. We'll find out. Sometimes you just got to trust the process a little bit. What other concepts can I teach you about reflections? Let's have a look. Let's come to these figures a little bit on the side here. I'm just going to move the camera for you guys a little bit on this side, because these guys on the edge of the camera over here, they've got some really nice reflections. See how they're reflecting the sunlight? So when you're thinking about reflections, right, you got to think about the environment they're in and the time of day. What kind of weather is it? It's a lot to think about. But as I said, you're kind of just doing a really tiny landscape painting on a very small surface. Now, this painting that I'm painting, it's in noon. It's a clear sunny day. So these reflections are quite strong. And that highlight of the sunlight is going to exist towards the top of the form, which kind of makes sense because the sunlight is high in the sky. And what you end up with is you get this really nice contrast between that highlight of the sunlight and this dark blue, which is a reflection of that blue sky gradient. Like again, on a bright sunny day, midday, you will see that gradient where the sky is like a really dark, rich blue, and then it gets brighter towards the horizon. Okay? And that's exactly what I've painted on these helmets. Towards the top of the helmet, it's this dark, rich blue, which would exist at the top. And then as I paint downwards, I brighten it up because I'm literally painting the horizon on the helmets. And then again, as I mentioned earlier, any plane that's facing downwards, like these side flaps of the helmets, right? They'd just be reflecting the earth. They would be literally reflecting the ground. And in this painting, I've got like this sort of warm, arid environment. So that's why I'm using very warm, arid tones in the helmets. So it's all pretty logical. You know, it takes practice and it takes a while to get your head around it, but you can paint reflective surfaces from imagination. And I think, to be honest, you kind of have to. I think reflections are that one subject, a bit like drapery, where you can have all the references you want, but they're probably not going to help you because you still have to make it work within the context of what you're painting. You have to make it work within the environment and the colors that you're using. So if you can understand the conceptual things behind reflections and light and shadow, then you can just paint them from your head, like what I'm doing here. You don't have to, and eventually you won't have to think too hard about it, but it does take practice. A lot of it too is, oh, hang on, I just got a comment. How do I open the... Do I know Vasily Vereshchagin? I don't know how to pronounce his name, but I absolutely love his work. He's one of my favorite Russian artists. I think he did a painting which was called Presentation of the Trophies, which was this sort of kind of like this Middle Eastern setting. It's quite macabre because there's like these guys who are collecting heads as trophies and they're presenting them inside of this temple. It's quite a brutal painting, but yeah, I love his work. He's one of my favorites. Same with Repin and Vasily Surikov. I love their work. I love their grand figural compositions. So I've had a few more people join the live stream, so I'll just kind of back the camera up so you guys can get a glimpse of the full painting. Very early days, very early days. You know, you can see I've got some landscape in there. I've got this big mushroom cloud there, which I kind of like the symbolism behind that storm cloud, you know. You know, you can kind of interpret that as you want. You know, are the Romans bringing the storm with them, or are they trying to escape from it? Are they trying to escape from the oncoming collapse of the empire? Who knows? But either way, I like the symbolism of that. Anyway, so this painting's in very early days, but it's coming along nicely, I think. And I'll carry on. I just got a bit distracted by talking too much, so let me just I just want to grab some of let me grab the shadow color, because what I want to do, I want to kind of, I don't really know if I need to do this, but I just want to kind of paint like this sort of crease in between these planes here. I don't know if that looks better or not. Maybe it doesn't. I just kind of want to pick out some shadow shapes here and there and everywhere. I don't want to detail this side too much because that's meant to be a little more bare bones. You know what, maybe I should just leave it because I think sometimes I go a bit overkill and I end up ruining it. Right. Okay, so I can see that full comment now. Sorry, I was just trying to... do you know Vasily Vereshchagin? I don't know why, but your style reminds me of him a little bit. That is like probably the best compliment I've ever received today. So thank you for that. Honestly, I don't think my work compares to that guy, because he was a master. I mean, they all were, but he was just so good at painting. I'm just trying to decide what this guy needs. So I'm just going to try and grab a little bit of that sky color again. I'm going to paint it. You see like this back flap of the helmet? You can probably see it on that guy. They had like this sort of flap on the back of these helmets, these Roman guys. I'm going to paint like a sort of highlight on the top there, but it's going to be the sky color. I don't think it would be reflecting the sunlight from that angle. Honestly, when it comes to painting reflections, it's all estimation. You know, like it's a little bit of conceptual stuff. It's a little bit of theory. Color temperature, value, painting the environment into the reflective surface. You know, like, yeah, it's pretty technical, but at the end of the day, a lot of my decisions are based around what looks good. You know, like if I think it's going to look better if I put a reflection here, for example, then I'm going to do it. You know, I don't have to be a slave to realism. I don't have to be a slave to whatever looks photorealistic, because at the end of the day, if you look at the old masters' paintings, they actually stylized it quite a lot. You know, their brushstrokes are very vibrant. They're you know, incredibly effective. They simplified a lot of things here and there. They were more concerned with what looks good rather than what looks real. How do you do the figures? Imagination? Yes. I've studied... Okay, so here's the thing. I know a thing or two about human anatomy, but I don't obsess over human anatomy. Like, you know, you've got artists like Michelangelo, and even more recently, you know, even artists today like Robert Liberace. You know, those guys are like anatomical masters, right? I'm not. What I'm concerned with when I draw a figure from imagination, I'm kind of thinking proportion, because that's the main thing. It's got to look like it's in proportion. And I'm thinking about the basic planes. And if I know the basic planes, then I can design the light and the shadow shapes a bit better. And if I can design the light and the shadow shapes, then that's kind of it. That's really all I need to know. I mean, you know, maybe I should use some references, like especially with like the hands and the arm here, I think looks a little bit awkward. I mean, they look good, but they'd probably look better if I was using a reference for that. I have a feeling actually that this arm here at this angle should actually be in shadow. I don't know. I'm just trying to think with the direction that the light source is coming from, that should be a lot darker on that plane. But at the end of the day, it's like I said before, just like the reflections, you just paint what looks good. And don't try to overcomplicate it. Like again, this arm here, it's a bit lumpy looking. I don't know why I painted it like that. But you know what? I thought, screw it. I like it. I like the way that looks. Like forearms are not my strong point, I'll admit. Yeah, exactly. A stylized anatomy. That's exactly the word for it. And I think it's much more effective for artists to do it that way. I mean, Da Vinci, he drew human heads from imagination a lot. And they weren't really focused on, I mean, you know, they were very good at anatomy, but they were also very good at style. They were really good at breaking the rules a little bit and making it look better than reality. And I think that's kind of what we should be doing. We shouldn't be a slave to reality. We shouldn't be copying from photos to the point where it makes us feel sick, because that's what I used to do. No, you should have more freedom in your work. You should be a bit more creative. You should experiment with color, and you should play with anatomy, and you should try to design figures that that you want to design. Like, you know, his face kind of looks a little bit awkward to me, so maybe I'll change him. I don't know. He just looks a bit, I don't know. Maybe he looks fine. But I really like how he turned out. And I like this guy here. I put a lot of effort into him. I like his facial expression. But yeah, some of these guys, you can see like this dude here, they look very, they don't actually look that real. They look like caricatures. Wouldn't you agree? So, you know, when I'm painting faces, I keep the basic planes in mind, and then I just kind of go from there. But the values are doing a lot of the work. I'm not trying to overburden myself with too much anatomical knowledge. At the end of the day, I just kind of want to get the job done. Okay, so let's... Okay, you know what? I'm going to just grab a darker tone, because I think I figured out what I wanted to do. I just want to finish off this bronze helmet right here, and there's like a side plane that kind of wraps around and tucks behind that plane right there. Sorry if my fat head is in the way. Unfortunately, this is kind of intricate work, so I've got to get right up close. I know I shouldn't be leaning my hand on the canvas, but sometimes you just got to. Anyway, it's all dry. The paint's dry, so I'm not too concerned. Right, so that's not bad. I think, you know, I could probably touch that up a bit more, but he doesn't look too bad. So I don't know if there's anything else I want to really do with him. You know what I do want to do with him? I want to get like a bit of like an orange reflect under that visor. You see here? If I can, I don't know if this is going to work. I think the paint's maybe going to overpower it. I don't think that reads very well. Let me get some more yellow in that. I want like a really warm sort of reflection under that visor. Just because I think it looks good. There's no other reason. I don't know if that looks realistic, but I think it looks cool. It's very subtle, but I think that works. Are these alla prima? Not quite. So as you can kind of see, I'll zoom out. Is that zooming out? Oh, there we go. God damn, my fingers keep getting in the way. There we go. So I've done an underdrawing, which I did with burnt sienna. That horse looks a little bit awkward, but maybe I can fix it. And then I just kind of scrubbed in a very minimal amount of titanium white. You can see I've done it here on the shields too. And I just kind of use that as my underdrawing. And then the colors are actually painted on directly after that. So yeah, when I'm painting the flesh tones or the helmets, I'm mixing every single color that I think I need, and I'm just going for it. In the past, I used to paint with layers. I've got another painting that I'm working on right now, which I am painting with layers. But for this one, I decided that I would just paint directly because I actually think it looks better. I think the colors are more vibrant. I think surprisingly it's easier somehow. I don't know why. Maybe it's just the way my brain works. But I'm finding the other painting, which I'm painting with layers, first of all, it's taking too long. And it just doesn't look quite as good as I hoped it would. I think I can pull it back, but I don't know. For this one, I thought, screw it. I'm just going to mix all the colors that I need, and I'm just going to paint directly. But no, it's not alla prima. Alla prima is kind of when you finish a painting in a single session. So, you know, maybe like a 3-hour portrait or something. This painting, I'm obviously taking a lot of time with. So, for example, in one session, I might paint all of the hands, you know. And then in the next session, I might paint the faces and mix all the colors I need for that. Yesterday, I painted the helmets and I mixed all the colors I needed for that. And then today, I'm painting the bronze helmets. So I've mixed all the colors that I need for that, and I'm painting directly. So I'm doing it in separate sessions, but yeah, I'm painting directly. So hopefully that answers your question. Okay, so look, I think he's fine. I think he's that's about as good as he's going to get. Maybe I can No, you know what? I'll leave him. If I need to touch him up later, I can. You know what I will do though? I'm going to get a bit of burnt sienna and a bit of ultramarine blue. And I'm just going to kind of use that those two colors to mix a black or something that looks close to black. Bit more burnt sienna, a little more blue. There we go. Now, the reason why you would mix your black is so that you can control the temperature, because as I kind of mentioned earlier, painting is less about color and it's actually more about values and temperature. I remember my friend Gary, he's a landscape painter, he does very good work, and I like what he said about color. He said, you know, when you look at a painting, it's actually your values that are doing all the heavy lifting, but color comes in to steal all the glory. And I fully agree with that. So when I paint these figures, yes, I want to use really nice colors, but I'm not really overthinking the color. I'm actually thinking, first of all, value, because that's the most important part, you know, your lights and your shadows and your midtones. And then after that, I'm thinking about temperature, because the thing is, guys, I'm actually not that good with color. I used to be terrible at it, and sometimes I still am. Like, the reason I never show you any of my plein air paintings is because they're horrid. So you're never going to see them. But the trick that I learned about color is that, you know, if I think about warm and cool tones, I tend to get better results. I don't know, for some reason, it's like I can come to the answers a lot more easily. Right, so I think he's finished. I just painted in that little bit of dark shadow in like the ear region. And I think that's him done, unless I want to use that same shadow color and come under here, under the visor, to kind of give a bit more contrast. Maybe that's too much. Actually, I don't think that's too bad. I think that works. But all right, I'm going to leave him alone. So let's move on to the next figure. Just going to wipe my brushes. So I paint in sessions. Like, if I'm going to work on bronze materials, then I'll just do that all day. Because the last thing I want to do, like, I don't want to paint a silver helmet, a bronze helmet, a yellow shield, a red shield, you know, flesh tones. That's way too much. That's too much work. Like, when you're working on a big painting like this, you really just want to break it down. So I just mix the colors that I'm going to be using for the day, and off I go. And I don't have to worry about anything else. I want to paint a bronze helmet on, which figure do I want? Him. Because I think that would look good on him. Because I've got, see, this is the thing. I've got these two figures that actually are in very similar poses. He's looking up this direction, and so is he. You see that? Like, I've kind of repeated this pattern, which I try to avoid, but, you know, didn't end up happening. They do look different. So I'm thinking, if I just use a bronze helmet on him, maybe that breaks up that pattern a bit more, but I'm not sure. But let's go for it. So I need to oil in that surface. I need to prime it with a bit of oil. It's just so freeing to be able to do stuff straight out of your head. Yeah. Well, that's why I think it's important to be able to draw from your head, because you can bring any creation you want to life. But it's a lot of work. It's, you know, and it's not that you ever stop using reference, because, you know, you've got to, that's how you learn. You got to know what things look like in reality to be able to paint them. Like, if I'm painting Roman helmets, then I should probably do some research on those and figure out what a Roman helmet looks like. But that doesn't mean I can't stylize it as well. Like, these helmets that I'm painting, they're not really true to life. I made a few adjustments. Sometimes I simplify them. And I make changes to the shapes here and there. So I'm just oiling in. I'm using a combination of linseed oil and a bit of mineral spirit. And I'm just kind of rubbing my finger in there. And the drawing does kind of rub off a little bit, but that's okay because I'm going to paint over it right now. So I'm not bothered. But you can kind of see how basic the underdrawing is compared to the finished result. I think it helps to work from a basic painting rather than overcomplicating it. So let me grab my brush that I'm using for my shadows. Let's use this. And I will begin with this warm shadow, which is like this reddish brown. That's going in the foreground, right there, underneath that visor. And then that will turn, as that form turns away from the viewer, that will get a little cooler. So I've got like a sort of greenish brown. But they look, value-wise, they look very similar. You can't really tell the difference. I'm going to go for that shadow color again. I'm going to paint over here. And I'm just going to kind of sketch it in. So the way I paint is kind of just like the way I draw. I just kind of sketch things in very carefully. Like the Marian reforms was not overnight. Rome was not built in a day. But that's the thing, like I don't really know how historically accurate the armor that I'm using in this painting is. Like I've done a bit of general research, but at the end of the day, if I have to sacrifice historical accuracy to make the painting look better, then I will, because historically, that's always what artists have done. We probably shouldn't be doing that, but we do. Composition comes first. But I was looking at some photos of like historical reenactments and things, and I was quite surprised at how varied the armor actually was. Like there was like steel helmets, and then there was like bronze helmets, and some of the shields were kind of different. And it makes perfect sense because, while the Romans did have a general uniform, it's not like things were mass produced back then. So, it just kind of makes sense that there was a bit of variety in the armor. What do I want now? I've got to think. So I apologize, but I'm just going to go a bit quiet right now, just while I think. It's a bit of a thinking game. You know what I will do? I'm going to lay in some of my base colors because that's what I need to do right now. I need to. So I've got like this very warm golden color, which I'm sort of using as a base, and that color is going to get painted right in the center of the object. I'm painting very thinly, by the way. I'm not packing it on. If you want to paint impastos, you can do that as like finishing touches. But right now, I'm going to just paint very thinly, very carefully, and just proceed carefully. And the thing is, if I do a good job now, then I don't really have to paint it again, So it's actually quicker to work carefully. All right, now I'll start by painting this top part of the helmet, which is like this spherical part. Let's have a go at those temperatures, because there's a temperature shift as it begins to reflect the sky. So I've got that warm gold brownish color. Then what I'm going to do is I'm going to jump to this sort of greenish color, which is still warm, but it's neutral. And it's a lot cooler than the other color. So I'm just going to paint that on top there. I don't think the camera picks up on all of these temperature shifts, unfortunately. But if in doubt, just paint thinly. Don't lay it on thick. All right. Now I need to go a little bit brighter. So I need a brighter value, but it's got to be even cooler because we're trying to get to that blue sky color. We'll never quite get there because the bronze tone would sort of be overpowering it, but we'll get somewhere close. So I'm using this sort of neutralized green, which has got a little bit of blue in it. It's like a grayish green. That's the best way I can describe it. It looks a bit warmer on the canvas though. That's okay. And then as I climb to the edge of the surface, I'm going to take that greenish gray and mix it with my blue gray so that I can get a tone that's closer to that sky blue, and I'll paint it over here. So it's a pretty logical progression, and you can see that the colors actually kind of work, they're working together quite well. Exactly what colors these are, I couldn't tell you, because I don't really think in color, I think in temperature now, and that's been a lifesaver for my painting practice. You know, when I used to paint like years ago, I just could never get my colors right because I was thinking color, 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 you know? I was trying to think yellow, blue, green, olive, khaki, but I'm not good at that. But when I started seeing things in temperature, warm greens, warm blues, cool blues, everything started to make sense a bit more. And then I found that my colors were actually speaking to each other. Of course, I also had to neutralize them a bit. You know, if your colors are not communicating, maybe it's because they're a little too vibrant. I don't mind a bit of vibrancy in my painting. I think these helmets that I'm painting are quite vibrant. Maybe a lot more vibrant than they should be. But, you know, I like colorful colors. What can I say? As long as they're working together, then it's fine. I'm going to grab some of this. I'm going to grab some of this bright blue-gray color, and I'm going to paint that along the edge of that helmet, and that's going to be the Fresnel effect, which I wonder if does the camera pick that up? Oh, it does. Don't get hung up too much on reference, in my opinion. Yeah, exactly. You know, when it comes to references, the point of using a reference is not to copy it. The point is to study it and to actually understand what's happening in that image. But I think a lot of artists, they don't, maybe they don't think that way. But the thing about references is, you know, the more you use them, the more you become a slave. And that's what I was a few years back. I used to just copy from photographs all the time, you know? I was drawing portraits of like, you know, like those hyper-realistic portraits of celebrities and crap like that. That's what I used to do. But it didn't make me happy. You know, it felt like I was becoming creatively bankrupt because I wasn't producing the images that I actually wanted to produce. No offense to anybody who likes doing that, but for me, I just wanted to paint other things, but in order to do it, I had to really learn the fundamentals of light and shadow and reflections and perspective and all the technical crap, which was hard. It took me years to learn, but it was also very rewarding, and it was actually quite fun. Like having that challenge, it was actually good having a challenge like that. It just gave me something new to look forward to. Okay, so I've got that going on. I'm not sure if that's really working as well as I thought. Maybe I need to get more warmth back in there, perhaps. I'll get this warm green. Oh yeah, that works a bit better. I just got to kind of, I need to get that darker green actually. I'm going to take that dark green, mix it in with a little bit of that blue. And then I'll use that towards the top of the helmet there. There we go. And that's kind of like the atmosphere of the Earth. So remember when I said earlier when the sky, the blue sky color is darker towards the top and then it's brighter towards the horizon? So that's kind of what I'm doing here. I'm painting that darkness towards the top of the sky right here. Oh, that might have been a bit too dark. And then the horizon gets brighter. But because this is a bronze surface, I have to use warm colors. So that's why I'm using that sort of greenish color. Can you recommend some books on the perspective of shadows? You know, I know Scott Robertson gets mentioned sometimes a bit too much, but I think his book, How to Render, is actually really good for casting shadows. Like, I think you can't go wrong with that source. And he also takes it a step further. You know, he talks about the science of reflections and color. Again, goes a bit too far with it. Like, it goes over my head. I always try to simplify where I can. But yeah, Scott Robertson, How to Render. I think that's a great resource for casting shadows. That's where I learned it from. I don't think you can go wrong with that one. I might just cool that down just a touch because I think that was probably a bit too strong. There we go. All right. There we go. Yeah, I'm just proceeding carefully. Like, it does take me a while to get my head around it, but once you get into that rhythm, it's doable. If you do pick up that book, How to Render by Scott Robertson, there's a whole, I think there's like several chapters on reflections. I mean, look, you're welcome to read it all, but honestly, I just kind of skimmed over most of it because it was too much. I was like, I don't need to know all of this. I just need to paint the illusion of reflectivity. I don't actually have to know everything about them. Okay, so what do I want? I think I'm gonna paint in that highlight. So the sunlight, let's paint that. I'm just gonna go straight for the highlight right now. So I've got this sort of off-white. It's like a greenish yellowy white. And that's going to go pretty much towards the top of the form. So if I look at the other images for context, it's like, okay, the highlights there, they're sort of like top left corner, right? So maybe I'm going somewhere there. Let's put it there. Looks good. Then I'll just kind of fill that in. This is kind of my opportunity to get some like really nice textures in there. So I'm going to just kind of grab maybe like this warmer color. I've got like a warmer tone. It's got a bit more of that greenish yellow in it. And I'm just painting around that highlight. And I don't want to like overblend it because I like the texture that's kind of coming out of that. I'm just kind of patching it in, you know? See how I'm just kind of like tapping the canvas? I'm not like rubbing it back and forth. And if you paint thinly, those colors should kind of appear as if they're passing through each other. Kind of like what you get with glazing. Rendering such complex form is a very cool exercise. Honestly, that is the best way to learn how to paint form and draw it. I think Steven Zapata, I don't know if I pronounce his name properly, but you know, he's very famous. I think he's on rendering form, which I thought was very good. And he teaches you basically how to render like really organic forms. I'm going to kind of break up this highlight so I can get like that illusion of texture in the helmet. Again, some of these the camera might not be picking it up the best way. Oh, it does a pretty good job of picking it up. That's all right. But breaking up those brush strokes just gives the illusion of texture. So that's the thing. I don't have to paint the scratches and dents in the helmet. I just have to place my tones in such a way that it kind of looks like that. You know, painting is all about illusion. It's not really about literally painting the form exactly as it is. Let me just have a look at that last comment. Oh, hang on. Hey, Thomas. I've been working on my boxes and cylinders in perspective. It's a slow journey, but worth it for me as a beginner. Yeah, best place to start. Listen, boxes, cylinders, cones, those geometric forms, they are harder than people think. I think the problem is a lot of art schools, they kind of gloss over it and they don't really go into the intricacies of it. But there's so much to learn about those geometric shapes. Like you can learn shadow casting, you can learn color theory if you apply color to them. You can learn reflective material. You can do this on a ball, you know? You could do this on a cylinder. You can do everything with them. And if you can do it on a cube or a ball or a cone, then you can do it on this. You know, like this dome that I'm painting for the helmet, it's just like a half sphere, isn't it? It's just a ball cut in half. That's how I'm painting it. This visor that runs along the top, that's like a very thin cylindrical, I don't know, disc. Some of these forms are a little complex, but that's why we simplify them. The geometric shapes are the best way to get good. I don't believe in bark plates. I don't believe in, I guess, the more Western way of teaching art where they put tons of still lifes in front of you. Like still life is good. It is a good exercise, but the problem with the way they teach is that they teach you to draw what you see. Whereas the Russians and the Chinese academies, they actually to teach you to draw and paint what you know. And you're only as good as what you know. Like you might be very good at painting what you see, but you know, if I took all of your references away and I said, okay, now paint a human face, you know, could you do it? You know, it's pretty hard. But the Russians, they train in geometry. I was reading about their curriculum. And I read somewhere that Russian students have to spend anywhere between 6 months to a year training with the geometric forms. Now, that's probably a little bit overkill. I don't think you have to go that far, but that should give you an idea as to how seriously they take it. Whereas, you know, with Western academies like Ateliers and things, you know, the academies in Florence and what have you, they will teach you to paint what you see. So they get you doing the sight size thing, they get you doing the bark plate thing, but that doesn't really teach you about perspective. That doesn't teach you about three-dimensional form. It's kind of surface level. You have these artists who are very, very good at painting what they see, but they're not so good at painting what they know. And that's why I think that's where the gap exists, you know? The Russian curriculum, right? You know, at the St. Petersburg Academy and the Moscow academies, they have far more in common with the old masters of the West, like, you know, the Renaissance artists of Italy, Rubens, Rembrandt. They have far more in common with those artists than any of these Western ateliers. So I think it's kind of tragic, actually, that Western education has kind of gone in the direction that it's going in, because it's like they're kind of not going in the right direction. You do have some Western academies. That being said, you do have some, but most of them are very obsessed with bark plates, and they're not really doing them right. So, but you know what I am impressed by? I am impressed by concept artists. I am impressed by the artists, you know, like in the video game industry. Like, yes, you know, they work digitally, but they also work traditionally, and they understand anatomy and animation and perspective. So, you know, I think maybe learn from them and then try to learn from the classical old masters and see if you can integrate some classical techniques into your practice. That might be the way to go. Let me have a look. That was another comment. Which way is the best way to learn to draw from imagination? Start with your basic perspective, you know, 1 point, 2 point perspective, and then the geometric forms, try to master those, because anything you're confused about, whether it's color theory, or I kind of just had this conversation, but if you want to learn color theory or shadow casting or perspective, you can do it with basic shapes. And if you can do it with a basic shape and draw those from imagination, then you'll be able to eventually draw this. Like it's a massive stepping stone. But, you know, the thing about drawing from imagination is you do have to study from life. Not necessarily from life, but you do have to study from reference. But that's the key word, is study. Like I mentioned before, a lot of people just copy from reference. They're not really studying. Like, when it comes to reflective surfaces, right, a lot of people will just paint what they see, but they're not really making a clear effort of understanding why the form appears like it does. So I hope I'm explaining that right. And it all comes from the basic shapes. Glenn Villepeu, there was a comment about Glenn. I know Glenn Villepeu, well, I know his work. Glenn Villepeu was talking about how the old masters learned differently. Yeah. So they were very invested in form. They were very interested in how, you know, you could render form realistically. You know, the old masters, they were drawing all kinds of mythical things, you know, Medusas and dragons and all kinds of things that don't really exist, but they rendered them very realistically. But they also did it with style. You know, you look at an old painting and it doesn't look like a photograph. It actually looks better. It actually looks better than real life. So, you know, they concerned themselves, you know, with anatomy and perspective and all the rest of it, but they also made sure to make sure it looks good and to choose colors that are very captivating to look at. So I think it's a balance, you know. I know we want to learn everything we can about the three-dimensional world so that we can paint it better. But I also think you should stylize and leave enough room for that, because that's what the old masters did. If you have a look at their brushstrokes and really take a look at their paintings, you'll kind of realize, you know, they're not as realistic as you think. They just look very, very good. The colors they choose are nice. They've got a very good idea of what kind of color compositions work. Okay, so my phone is about to die, so I better cut this live stream here and recharge it. But I'll record me working on this painting again soon. So don't worry, you won't miss out. Next time I'll try to paint something else, maybe like one of these shields or maybe the armor or something, I'm not sure. But anyway, I hope you enjoyed it. I think we had a pretty good discussion of art education and what things to learn and stylization and things like that. Cheers for watching, guys. Good luck with your own creations too, okay? Best of luck with your own creations. Keep learning from the masters. Make sure you're studying those brush strokes. Trust me, you'll learn a lot by the way they draw and move the paintbrush around. All right, guys, take care.